make it today. We are in the book of Numbers in chapter 20 and 21. What we've got going on here is that the Israelites have been in the wilderness, also known as the desert, for almost 40 years. It's just about time for them to head into the promised land that God has given to them. And a number of things happen right here close to the end, and it's pretty important because it changes things quite a bit for them. And the first thing that happens is that Miriam dies. Now, you may remember Miriam is the older sister to Moses and Aaron. She's been one of the leaders. In fact, she's been in the story from the beginning, because you may recall that when Moses was a baby, she was the one watching over him. So she has been a leader to the Israelites. God has spoken to her, has revealed things to her, and so she's an important part of the leadership of this nation, and her death has an impact on everybody there to a different extent. And this may have played into the next thing that happens, because the people are led by Moses and Aaron to a dry area, and they start complaining. Now, most of the people who have been complaining all of this time have died in the desert, but we see that complaining is one of those things that people are pretty good at, and they can learn to do that if things do not go their way. And so what we're seeing is a little bit of a hint that even though most of the Israelites who had rebelled against God and were not going to be allowed to go into the promised land had died, the people coming along can be just as bad if they're not careful. Well, they're complaining, and they even use the same old complaints about the food that they're missing out on, and how things were back in Egypt, even though a lot of them would not even remember Egypt at this point. So it's just a lot of whining going on. Now, God has told Moses to speak to the rock and water would come forth. Well, Moses doesn't do that. He does the thing he has done before. He takes his staff and he slams it against the rock, and the water does come out, but he's directly disobeyed God, and God lets him know, hey, because of that, you're not going to get to go into the promised land. Well, of course, that's bad news for Moses, but then there's a little bit more bad news coming up. God informs Moses and Aaron that Aaron's going to die pretty soon, and that he needs to take Aaron and Aaron's oldest son up on a mountain where they are, and Aaron is going to die there and be buried there, and the clothing that he wears, which is the official ceremonial garments that the high priest wears, are to be passed on to his oldest son. So that happens, and the people now see that, okay, we've lost Miriam and we've lost Aaron, we still have Moses. They may not know at this point that Moses will not be going with them into the promised land, but as a result, they now have one leader that they can look to, one human leader. Obviously, they're looking to God to lead them in things, but remember, they are scared of God and don't like it when he makes a demonstration of things, so they prefer to go through Moses. So after this, the Israelites are now heading to the area where they will cross over into the promised land. But there's a problem. There's a country sitting in the way. In fact, there are a couple of countries in the way, and it's kind of odd in those days because the size of a country would change depending on how powerful the king was, but there was usually a core area that you go, definitely this belongs to this group. Well, the Israelites want to go through Edom, and there's a highway going right through it that would be perfect for them. And so they ask permission to go on the king's highway through Edom, and they promise not to touch anything that doesn't belong to them and to not leave the road. And if they were to have water, they would pay for it, that sort of thing. But the Edomites don't want this big group of people coming through their country, and so they say no. They bring out their army, and the Israelites decide to go another way. Well, this happens in the next country along, and the Israelites end up going around these two countries. Well, they come to a third country, and this has Canaanites in it, specifically Amorites. Now, the Amorites, unlike the Edomites, are not related to the Israelites at all. With the Edomites, they are descended from the brother of Jacob, who is the head of the Israelites. So they at least have some kind of family connection. With these Amorites, no. In fact, the Amorites have already been selected by God to be wiped out. Of course, they don't know this. They see the Israelites show up, and their king musters his army, sends them out, and actually attacks the Israelites, and the Israelites wipe them out. And I'm talking about the whole country and their cities, and they take possession. Then there's another king. These kings have odd names, like Sihon and Og. And the next king along musters his army and attacks, and they wipe him out as well. So what we're seeing is that the Israelites can fight, and they can fight very well when they have the opportunity and when God is with them. And in this, God is definitely with them. And all of this fighting and their victories are going to lead to a story about Balaam that comes along later. But for right now, what you should know is that there's still some rebellion with the Israelites. Even though they're having these victories, there's still some rebellion against Moses, which really is a rebellion against God. And as a result, God sends out poisonous snakes and starts biting people. And these snakes start biting, and a lot of the people are dying. And God tells Moses, okay, make a copper or bronze snake. The word that's used there could be copper or bronze, but it's a metal snake, and raise it up, and the people who look at it won't die from being bitten. And so Moses does that, and the people are rescued from their own folly. Now, one thing I have to point out in this is that God usually doesn't have visual representatives of things. You may remember he said, don't make any idols, don't try to do anything that looks like what's in heaven. Do not do any of that stuff. You're to worship God in spirit, and you're not supposed to have these representations of God or the angels or anything in heaven, that kind of thing. And here, he does this, and it's a demonstration to us, because what we find out later is that the people keep this bronze or copper snake for years and years and years, and eventually it becomes a problem for them because they start treating it as an idol, and eventually it gets destroyed because of that. So when God says not to make a visual representation of him, he's serious, and there's a good reason for it. Okay, with this, what we have set up is that the Israelites are close to going into the promised land, and they are now seeing that they're a powerful force. Moses is still with them, although he's not going to be able to go with them in the end. And Moses is also using spies to check out the enemies ahead. So a lot of this story is going to seem pretty familiar as we go forward, because when the Israelites are following God, they will use strategy that will be good for them and that works. And they will follow that over and over and over. Okay, with that, I'm going to finish this lesson. But just know this, after nearly 40 years in the wilderness, Israel still has some of the same problems that they have had, but in other ways, they are better about following God. And there's always going to be this struggle. And what we learn from this is that even though some things may be hard to do as far as following God, we still keep trying. We still want to get better at what we do. Okay, with that, I will show you my tie. And in this lesson, what I've got, I didn't exactly have a snake, but I have a dragon, which the idea to me is that a dragon's a form of a snake in one sense. The devil's referred to both. And the bites from this poisonous snake probably felt like fire to the people. So that's why I came up with this one. All right, with that, I'm going to let you go, and I hope you'll be back next time. Bye.